What up, Long Beach? Welcome back to the Bracketology episode of LBST Long Beach Sports Talk, brought to you by the Gazette newspapers and the Press Telegram. As always, I am co-sports editor JJ Fiddler to my right.
Co-sports editor Mike Gardabasio to my right.
Bracket Day, Tyler Hendrickson, and we can't start this show in earnest without thanking our sponsors, Naples Rib Company and Papalucci's, putting the eat in 2nd Street and putting the et in bracket.
Season started in September, but the real games start now. All of the fall sports for the CIF Southern Section are headed to the playoffs. We are talking football today because these brackets are very interesting. You know where we're going to start, where everybody's got their eyes, the Pac5 Division. And for my money, I think the odds are pretty good that we get one of our local teams in that final at Angel Stadium, 8 p.m. on a Saturday night, like we always love to do it. God, that scene out there is just so great. And the two teams I'm talking about, you know who it is as well, St. John Bosco and the Poly Jackrabbits.
Well, yeah, and they're actually seeded to where if they both win 2 games, they meet in a semifinal, which turned out pretty good for the media, at least for us. The last time it happened, that classic Fog Bowl at Vets in 2012, where let me just say that for TV, generally you want your cameras up high so you can see a lot of stuff, okay, you know? But when there's that much fog, it kind of worked out for us that we were on the ground, and I honestly think we have the best video from that game, and I think we'd all love to see Poly Bosco in the semifinals. That would be awesome to have a Long Beach area semi again.
That scene at Vets is what high school football dreams and memories are made of. Just the fog rolling in, and obviously the big plays that went both ways. And John Juju Smith, that's all I have to say.
I mean, become a star in that game. He already kind of was, but he really put himself on the scene in a game like that. And games like that really create legends, and he took advantage of that spotlight.
No doubt. Tyler, you and I were talking the other day about the odds of one of those two teams making it to the final, and you brought up a good point. The fact that they play in a semifinal almost moves the odds more to the possibility of one of those teams making it to the final.
Yes, because they are together. So we're expecting to be at Angel Stadium for the Pac5 championship game, but let's point out, I mean, this bracket just keeps getting tougher and tougher every year. The depth in this bracket
by design
is ridiculous. Yes, by design, on purpose. And I think it's more open this year. Because last year, Bosco was so head and shoulders above the rest of the division, and we kind of saw that. But I think this year, they've moved back to the pack just a little bit. They still pretty darn good and national championship contenders for most of the year. But I think you feel like maybe it's not just going to be a Bosco party the whole way to the championship the way it was last year.
Party is a great way of putting it, because that was the thing. It was like last year they were just blowing teams out in the playoffs in ways that you really hadn't seen a team do in quite some time. So you expect them to be more in games and less in celebrations of their own quality so far.
Right, and not saying they're not going to win it again, just saying that there's probably not going to be a running clock in the semifinal the way there was last year.
There's not a reporter in California who's seen the Braves play more football over the last 2 years than our own Chris Trevino. We're going to bring him in. Chris, looking at that bracket, what Tyler just said, do you feel the same way, that this bracket is a little closer together to start than the bracket last year for the Braves?
Absolutely. I think just looking at it, you see it's going to be a fun one to cover. And obviously, St. John Bosco is really interesting because they are defending state champions. Everyone is coming for them. And the real interesting thing I see about them is that last year they were so talented, so senior heavy, that they played the same way all throughout the year. Now, this really young team has really changed from that first game in Hawaii, and now to here starting the playoffs. And me and Jason were talking about that, and just this team is completely different from that team in Hawaii, and even that team that lost in Vegas. So I'm really excited to see how these young guys with all this experience under their belt really handle these playoffs going forward.
As the top seed, they get a pretty easy road to that semifinal. We mentioned they're going to take on Cabrillo in the first round and then take on the winner of Norco St. Bonaventure. I know some other Pac5 coaches who wished they were on that side to take on a Norco or a St. Bonaventure, thinking about the talent coming out of the Trinity League and some of the other teams that they have to play on the other side of the bracket. I'm looking at Lakewood, Mott. They could have very easily ended up on that other side with the game against Norco. But let's move to Poly, because Poly right below that in the next section going to take on Servite in the first round. They would then take on the winner of Crespi Santa Margarita in the second round. But Poly Servite's got some history on it, and probably not history you would anticipate or even guess.
You have to search pretty hard for a team that Long Beach Poly hasn't beaten, or an elite team that I don't think they haven't beaten most Division 12 schools. But if you're looking at the Pac5 and the teams that have won championships, Poly's been around for 106 years, so they've gotten on top of most of those teams. 2012, they knocked one of those teams off the list when they beat Mission Viejo. Servite, I think, is really the last one on it. But yeah, they're 0-6 against Servite. That includes 3 playoff losses, including 1 championship game. You know, you always wonder, because we know this history, and you wonder, like, well, do the kids at the school know the history? Right? They're not necessarily historians of local sports. I asked Antonio Pierce about it on Bracket Day, and he just kind of smiled, and he was like, we're aware. So certainly I think the history will be something of a motivation for Poly. A lot of the kids at Poly this year were on that team that lost to Servite last year, kind of a surprise loss. So I would expect this to be a pretty emotional game.
Well, and these teams saw each other. They were the scrimmage before the year, and Poly came out and looked very good and first started turning eyeballs when they put it on Servite in that scrimmage to start that game out. You know, the Friars started this year as a top 25 team in the nation. Everybody thought they were going to be one of the teams to beat. They maybe could challenge Bosco. Hasn't exactly gone to plan for them, but still a ton of talent. Oregon-bound quarterback Travis Waller, great wide receiver Equanimous St. Brown, who's been hurt. Gone are the days that if you're one of the seeded teams, you get an easy matchup in the first round. And Poly, if they go through this bracket, they could get a tour of the Trinity League. Santa Margarita round 2, maybe Bosco in the semis, maybe Jay Serra as one of the top seeds going further into the potential final.
Or Mater Dei even, yeah.
Or Mater Dei even. So the Trinity League will be very active in this bracket, as everyone expects, and it starts in round 1 for Poly, and again against a team they've never beat. So they got to get over that hurdle and then keep the momentum going.
So if you were to break down the Pac-5 bracket as they do the NCAA men's basketball bracket, where each section was a region, so let's say the Bosco, Cabrillo, Norco, St. Bonaventure was a section, what's fascinating to me is the one section that doesn't involve one of our local teams is the rematch section. You've got Corona Centennial and Serra, and then Westlake and Mater Dei. Now, Westlake and Mater Dei know each other pretty well.
Game of the year.
I mean, you're right?
Yeah, it was a game of the year.
Game of the year.
I think, yeah.
And then you've got Corona Centennial waiting for the winner of that game, which could be Mater Dei, which those two teams played at Mission Viejo in the football classic.
That was not game of the year.
That was not game of the year. My point being, I always like to think about who's going to get the coaching advantage, and you always take the elder statesman with familiarity in the playoffs, right?
Well, Bruce Rollinson's obviously been there and done that, if that's what you're pointing out about Mater Dei.
A
Yeah.
little bit not Mater Dei, but a little bit of everything. Down the road, in the playoffs, guys who have been there before and guys who have seen other teams before that night or before that week of preparation, I'm always going to give the edge to. It'll be interesting to see this year how a theory like that plays out.
That's kind of an interesting point with the Moore League, because no one in the Moore League now has been coaching their school for longer than 3 years. It seems like, especially with the 2 coaches already leaving in the Monday and Tuesday after the season ended, with John Jansen resigning at Wilson, and Elijah Asante being fired at Compton. And then if Jason Brown ends up leaving too, then you've suddenly got, okay, it's the Moore League. We're back to 3 new coaches every year. Half the league is a first-year coach kind of thing that we're sort of used to at this point.
I said that. I guess I'm thinking of it more as an obstacle as opposed to a boundary. I'm not saying it's impossible for a first-year coach to come in and make some noise.
Well, it's happened at Poly every year since 1980.
Exactly.
Or every time they had a first-year coach.
It's nice to come in with a full cupboard, and that's not saying anything about
Antonio
those coaches.
Pierce certainly didn't come in with an empty one.
No, he did not.
Well, and I think that's the fascinating thing when you talk to AP, is because he is a first-year coach, not just to Poly. This is the first time he's coached. So, at all. And so he's new to this section, but when you talk to him, you realize, and he references it all the time, how much film this guy watches.
Yeah.
He's really a film rat, and so he's very familiar with these teams.
He's an NFL player on a film-intensive defense that now watches film for ESPN as well. It is really, he just talks about, like, you're asking him what he did the other day, and it's like a Tuesday at 2 a.m., and he was just up watching film on a team he thought they might play in the playoffs. And this was in, like, late September,
So, he's been preparing for this, especially knowing how things were probably going to go during league. So, and he referenced on Bracket Day how they were able to, like, rest up and sort of prepare for the playoffs, and that's something that he's been able to do. So that's how you make up the learning curve, is you have the outlier of a Super Bowl winning linebacker that really knows about watching film and preparing to play these teams.
So let's look at this bracket. I'm not going to make anybody predict anything, but let's just say, do you foresee one of these top 4 seeds, St. John Bosco, Poly, Corona Centennial, and Jay Serra, one of those teams, do you think all of them make the semifinal, or do you see one of them get knocked off?
I would very much not be surprised if Corona Centennial doesn't make it to the semifinals, because I don't personally believe that style really translates to the playoffs, particularly in the Pac-5.
You saw them beat Pauley, and the way they did that was just by basically scoring a lot of points.
Right? They're very comfortable winning games 70-63, and I don't necessarily know that that's the right approach when you're playing a team like Mater Dei that wants to get you into a physical, personal kind of a game, you know? So, I think that second round game for Corona Centennial, whether they get Westlake or Mater Dei, but I personally would expect them to get Mater Dei. I think that would be big trouble for Corona Centennial, in my opinion.
Well, and I agree with that assessment, Mike, because especially the Huskies are new to this division. It's quite the grind.
They're not used to 4 weeks back-to-back of guys that can platoon huge offensive linemen. You know?
Right, so that could be a potential stumbling block just because it's a hard adjustment to get that big win and then try to prepare, and there's a good chance they'll travel, because if Mater Dei wins, they'll be on the road.
Yeah, Corona Centennial at Mater Dei, I think, going into that atmosphere too, obviously, because the Monarchs fans are crazy when it comes playoff time. I think that would be a pretty big test.
On paper, that's the best second-round matchup I could possibly see in this bracket. Can we also say, because we spent a good amount of time last year talking about how we would have made the bracket different, that this year, looking at the Pac-5 bracket, I really can't think of any major moves I would make. I think they pretty much got this one right.
I completely agree with you. I think it's a very fair bracket. I don't disagree with the at-large teams. There were some people complaining for whatever reason that 2 teams got the at-larges from the Trinity League.
Look, if you've seen Trinity League football this year, Chris, you can back us up on this because you've seen it a little bit. It's pretty darn good, and not only was it darn good, it was darn close across the entire board.
As a player told me, it's the SEC of high school football.
Right, and so even people who don't like it, who think SEC football gets too much attention or love or whatever, those people don't deny that it's still the best. It's still the best football being played in the country, right? And so, similar thing to me. The Trinity League, to me, as long as it stays where it is right now, you almost should basically just give them those 2 at-large spots. Regardless, I mean, I think you could...
Or give them their own bracket.
But I think you could, without question, say that Orange Lutheran's better than probably 4 of the teams in this Pac-5 bracket, right? I mean, like, it's such a good league.
Put Olu in some of those other leagues and do that math.
Well,
you know what I mean?
Okay, it's like, do you think Cabrillo's going to be closer to Bosco than Olu would have been? I don't think so.
Well, I mean, Bosco had a fight with Olu, and Olu definitely blew out Cabrillo when they played earlier this year.
Olu team isn't going to get to sniff the playoffs, you know?
On any given Friday, Olu could be any of those 16 teams.
Amen.
Yeah. They hung with Bosco for a long time on the road. Through the first 12 Trinity League games, 10 of them were 1-possession games, and the average margin of victory was 6 points.
That's
crazy. A little over 6 points. That's how close that league was, and so the difference between Santa Margarita and Olu isn't that much. It's just, a few plays here and there. So, I mean, really, the only argument should be, should we have found a way to get the entire Trinity League into these playoffs? Not, why did they get both at-large teams? Because obviously they should have gotten both at-large teams. It's the best league in the nation, in the world.
The
world! Nay, the universe!
We just wait until they shift the way that the playoff system is set up, and I don't think that'll be. I think we will see every Trinity League team in the playoffs.
I mean, facts only. That's the way it is. But I think this is the best bracket that we've ever seen for the Pac-5. As soon as we saw it, it's like, man, that's a great bracket. That's fair, and that's going to be awesome.
Absolutely. Chris is going to be at Bosco Cabrillo. I am going to be at Lakewood Mott. Mike is going to be at Pauley Servite. You can follow all of the Pac-5 football scores on Friday night right here at the Press Telegram and GazetteSports.com. You know we love the double dip, and we got it all over the place in the Southeast Division where the San Gabriel Valley and Suburban Leagues live. You've got Mayfair, Dominguez, Norwalk, Paramount, Downey, and La Mirada all ready to make a charge for this CIF title. Obviously, great games in both leagues all season long, but I think the game we're all looking at is the double dip. Norwalk, Paramount at Excelsior, 7 o'clock on Friday. That is where Tyler is going to be. And Tyler, we've seen some really good games in this division last year and the year before that. I think we can expect the same this year, too.
Without question, the SED, the Southeastern Division.
Nice.
And a bunch of teams that have a chance to make a run. And, we look at that first matchup, that double dip, Norwalk and Paramount, the Lancers, who made it to the championship game in this bracket last year. Obviously a very different team, and they've lost a lot. But they've got the momentum that they got in the second half of their loss to La Mirada. They outplayed the Matadores for that second half, so they're feeling like, they maybe have gotten some things figured out. They're starting to click a little bit. And Paramount really scuffling towards the end of the year, have not been able to score against quality defenses. So Norwalk, a pretty good matchup, going in the right direction against a team that looks to be going sort of in the wrong direction the few times that we've seen them. So the Lancers, especially being at home, have a good opportunity there. But there's so many other teams, especially those SGVL teams at the top, Downey and Dominguez. We've talked about how interchangeable those teams could be, how close they were in the rankings. The Dons have to play the defending champions, Lacerna, on the road, but that could set them up to host the top seed St. Francis in the second round. And with that Dons rushing attack, that's a tough thing to prepare for. And you still have to find out how to tackle Keith Hairston and Josh Ford and company. Even if you know where they're going to be, you still have to bring those boys down. You know what I'm saying?
No, that is so true. And if I had to pick a team that maybe people forgot about because of what happened in the last week of the regular season, I would pick the Dons to be dominant. And then what a tough break. I mean, they could have been playing California or Muir or Cathedral, none of whom won their league. Instead, they're taking on, like you said, Tyler, the defending CIF champions of this division, and also an undefeated, maybe one of the best teams they've ever had at St. Francis High School. St. Francis taking on Mayfair. I like this bracket for our teams because Mayfair, the rumor is it might be Mike Fitch's last year. Mayfair's been playing really, really well. They got an incredible game from Q Hall last week. Maybe they don't upset them, but they will. I think that Mayfair is going to give St. Francis a run for their money, at least at the beginning of that game, because they are going to be fired up for that contest. And I expect the same from the Dons. You look at a Dominguez football program that's got its head coach limited to the sideline / not even there sometimes. You've got a team full of seniors who have been right on the brink of getting to a CIF championship. They've got to be feeling like the road is ending right in front of them right now. So if you think you're going to get anything less than 100% from that Dominguez Dons football team, you better strap up your helmet a little bit tighter.
Well, and the Dons and Norwalk met in last year's playoffs, and Rashad Penny, his heroics, carried Norwalk beyond that matchup. It would take some upsets, but I wouldn't shock me to see those two teams meet in the semifinals, because for Dominguez, it is a tough draw, but if they can pull off a couple of upsets here, at least on paper, it would set them up as the 1 seed. So this sets up a championship run if it doesn't set up winning the first game, if that makes sense. It doesn't make it easy to win a game in the playoffs, but if you were going to say who can be a dark horse and make a run all the way to the championship, it could be Dominguez. But obviously, man, those are two tough games back-to-back.
Chris, we've got the two league champions, Downey of the SGVL and obviously La Mirada of the Suburban League, both at the bottom of that bracket. La Mirada going to get the at-large bid Salesian at home in the first round, and Downey's going to be at home as well, taking on California, a number 3 seed from the Del Rio League. So you look at those two draws for those two teams, and if you're a fan of one of those two teams, you got to be feeling pretty confident right now.
Absolutely. I think you love the draws that they get, and them meeting possibly in the semifinals would be a great matchup, a great double dip in the semifinals. But the thing about Downey and La Mirada is that they're healthy. I mean, Downey, Jack Williams at Bracket Day was talking about this would be the first time we're healthy 100% heading into these playoffs. They get 2 offensive linemen back, and then star running back Justin Huff hopefully he's going to be back. He sounded confident that he would be for the first round against this California team. And then La Mirada, they had all those injuries last year. They had all the talent, but just couldn't get them on the field. And now they're going into this first round against Salesian pretty healthy. Tony Brown's good, Christian Lara, running backs running hard behind that offensive line. So, they're both healthy, and they're really feeling good about their chances of making a run here.
Yeah, La Mirada got the perfect season ender, I think. And I was there, so I saw it kind of happening as it did. And I was thinking, gosh, if I had to pick a way to win a league title but still keep my kids focused on what's coming up next and being able to teach on film, that's the game I want. Score really long touchdowns in the beginning, feel really confident about your offense, try to run the clock down a little bit in the second half, but be able to point at things on film and tell your kids, listen, if we make these mistakes in the coming weeks, we're not going to be playing football for very long.
Well, and Mike Machete said as much on bracket day, is that, they kind of let up and he was too conservative, in retrospect, trying to let that game sort of run out.
And all due respect to Machete, it's not like they were throwing the ball downfield and going voidical. Christian Lara was just dumping the ball off to who was obviously the best player on that field that night, T. Brown.
Well, and that's the thing. When you're in the playoffs, you want to have the playmakers. You want to have the explosive guys that can show up in big games. And absolutely, they've got maybe the best of any team in this bracket. So it does set up very well for them. And Downey, consider, their two biggest games of their league schedule were their last two games, and they won those without Justin Huff, who is one of their biggest playmakers. So if you think, man, if I add Justin Huff, we get a little healthier on the line, the way that defense has been playing, Downey is absolutely peaking on the right time. They might be the hottest team, and you see this all the time in the the NFL playoffs and other playoff formats. It's the team that's hot at the right time that can make a run. So the Vikings have to be feeling very, very confident going into the playoffs as they start out at home. And they've got a great home field advantage. So a lot of reasons to be excited in the Southeast right now as far as our area teams. Of course, you got to go out and play the games, but certainly some very compelling storylines right now.
We talked about it in the Pac5. Put your math hat on. What is the percentage chance that a Press Telegram area team is playing in the final for the Southeast Division title?
Oh my gosh. Well, we have 6 of the 16 teams, so, you can look at that as a percentage. I would say 60% chance that we will have one of the teams. You have a seeded team, number 2 at La Mirada, so odds are that they would make it. I might even go 65 because I'm pretty confident in some of the other teams.
I'm going to say 75%.
Ooh! He's feeling froggy. Go ahead and lead.
I'm feeling froggy. I think, I could see Downey, La Mirada, Dominguez. I could even see Norwalk getting back to the championship game. That's how confident I am that one of our teams will be playing for a ship.
Love it. Like we said, Mayfair at St. Francis, Dominguez at Lucerna, Norwalk taking on Paramount. That's where Tyler is going to be. La Mirada taking on Salesian, and Downey, California. If you want to follow all of those scores, or if you want to send us scores from the game that you're at PT Gazette Sports. The results speak for themselves, and we love to say we told you so. We've got our eyes on Los Alamitos in the West Valley Division, and for good reason. These Griffins can play some pretty darn good football, as they showed throughout Sunset League play.
Well, and they've got some motivation because this was the screw job of the bracket, at least for the Long Beach area schools. Really, no doubt, perhaps the only screw job of the bracket for the Long Beach schools. But man, did they get whacked!
Is it because they play on Thursday, and I don't know if CIF forgets that there's games on Thursday or something? Like, what is the deal?
No, I don't think that's what it is. I think it was. We had a great conversation about rankings earlier this season, and I think it kind of speaks to what Tyler said, which is this team was ranked too low to start. And as the season went on, they moved up a little bit, but they weren't going to move into the top 4. And to me, every other team in the bracket has at least 2 losses. Los Al has 1. Los Al beat one of the at-large teams in this bracket by like 1,000 points.
Oh, thank you, Sean.
It was like the fastest game we covered this year. It's just they're clearly a top 4 team.
They're clearly a top 4 team.
They handled Edison,
and you're right. Tyler said it. I think I said it too. These preseason polls get in the way of giving these teams what they deserve. If you take this division and do a preseason poll, I guarantee you that Los Al team would have been a top 4 seed, because there's no way you could have ignored those results. But if you look at the thing last year in, let's be honest, divisions that were shuffled, so much more difficult to put that in a preseason poll when you haven't even seen a division like this play out completely yet.
But the issue to me is that the coaches didn't do their job, because, for example, Poly did not start out anywhere near in the top 4 of the Pac5. They started out unranked, but as their results showed that they were good, those coaches were on it enough to move the teams up that should be moved up.
Though. Strength of opponent. Well, Los Al's not taking on the teams that have got the marquee.
That's their. To me, that's, if you're Los Al, the thing you take from this is we've got to schedule better non-league teams, because legitimately, if you look at some of the teams they beat, they weren't great teams. They did lose to Narbonne, who is the best team they played in non-league. It was such a close loss. I would think that would kind of still count for something.
I'm surprised that the strength of the Sunset League doesn't count for more.
But it is.
Is the Sunset League not the best league in this bracket? I think so.
No, I think the baseline league is definitely better. The South Coast Coast League, I think, would be better. I would put the Sunset League third, but I'd definitely say the baseline
Really?
South Coast League.
Better than the South Coast? You don't think the Sunset's better than the South Coast?
No.
I think Mission Viejo's overrated.
Well, I mean, I'm not going to argue that point with you, but the South Coast was just in the Pac-5, so
right.
I think
that's kind of my feeling. Is that it's they're
They got
essentially
moved down for a
away.
reason.
well, facts only.
So did the Sunset League earlier, though. Do you know what I mean?
So, but I think that is the main point here is that Los Al, if they want to contend for these seats, they're going to have to schedule a little more aggressively as far as playing
Edison
some
did
top
that.
teams. Edison
Because
did that.
Edison went out and played Serva. They played some top teams, and I think that they got the kind of respect for that.
But what's weird is that Edison was seeded. They were in one of those seeded spots until they played Los Al, and Los Al kind of took them behind the woodshed in the second half, but I guess didn't beat them impressively enough to switch places.
Well, you know what's funny?
No, they beat them too late. They had already turned in their ballots.
No, you know what?
guess so.
You know what was funny was we were wondering about this at the game because Edison scored a late meaningless touchdown in that game, 42-14 or 35-14.
35-14.
So and I was saying to Tyler, I was like, I wonder if they'd beat them 35-7, if that would have helped them more than beating them 35-14. And at the time we thought it was a joke because it was like, well, obviously they're going to be a top 4 team if they're 9-1 and they just kind of spanked a top 4 team. But now I kind of do wonder if it was 35-7 and people who didn't see the game but were just scanning the scores saw, oh, they really thumped Edison. It was almost a running clock. I wonder if that would have moved them up more.
But at the end of the day, as you know, John Barnes points out, I mean, he's been there for 35 years. He's been through these brackets. He's been through Division I brackets and gotten through them. So at the end of the day, you just got to go out and play. And it just sort of turns out with coin flips who gets to host.
Yeah.
And so they're going to be one of the top teams, and their draw is fine.
Yeah, their draw's fine because they don't have to take on a league champion until the possible semifinal against that Mission Viejo team we mentioned earlier.
So I think they will figure it out, and it could be a good thing because you can motivate the players to be like, they don't think you're one of the top teams.
I talked to Matt Locker for that feature, and without provocation, one of the first things he said to me was, everything happens for a reason. I got hurt last year. I love being overlooked, under the radar, underdogs. That whole team loves that attitude. So, yeah, we're sitting here complaining that they should have gotten more respect, but maybe less respect is going to be better for this team going forward.
And they might have the best defense in that bracket, so that's something that you want during playoff times is to have a good defense, and Matt Locker's obviously at the heart of that. So the Griffins looking, among one of the top teams. Mission Viejo, obviously a good team, even though they've really stumbled in the preseason and could be, there for the taking. Upland, obviously a great team, is the top seed from a great place.
Representing a great city as well.
Absolutely,
These
my
guys.
facts only, but watch out for those Griffins.
So Los Al taking on El Toro, the South Coast at-large team, Veterans Memorial Stadium tonight, Thursday, when the show comes out. The winner of that game will take on Chino Hills and Great Oak. Los Al getting that home game this time around. So, moving forward, we've got our eyes on the Griffins. You should too. Follow the score there Thursday night at PT Gazette Sports. I can't think of another playoff season where we've had more teams more ready for the playoffs, ready to make a run here. I'm thinking of 2 specifically because we've never been able to talk about the Northwest Division and the East Valley Division the way we can right now with Valley Christian in that Northwest and St. Anthony in that East Valley. Mike, we were talking about St. Anthony history last week, and we're talking about it again this week.
Well, yeah, Jay Cooper we mentioned the history that he's made. He now leads the school in 2 very big-time categories for a career, that's a big thing at St. Anthony because they do have a legitimate history there. They won a CIF championship before the CIF went to the multi-division approach. They were playing teams with, they had 300 kids at their school. They were playing teams with 3,000 students at their school. They effectively won a Pac5 championship in 1948, which is a really huge deal. But this week they're going for team history. If they win, which they're expected to win, they're seeded 3rd, so it's their first round game, they would be the first St. Anthony team to get to 10 wins since that championship season in 1948, which is a huge deal and a lot of history to make a first over.
Huge ups to Mario Morales and that coaching staff that have really taken that program so far in such a small amount of time and really turned it into something where the 3 of us are sitting there looking at the Moore League and saying, man, we could cover St. Anthony every week because not only do they put up the numbers,
right,
they're entertaining, they're fun to watch, they're great kids. It's a good program over there, man.
Well, and all they do is win. I mean, they've won 8 straight on the field, 9 straight if you include the forfeit, and they've really got some playmakers. Jalen Watson's come back into the fold, and he's been explosive on the outside. Roderick Ashford, all he does is score 3 touchdowns a game, and Jay Cooper is a veteran signal caller who has seen a lot. and they're flowing right now. They've really got to feel great about where they're at. They're in one of those seeded spots.
And talk about a defense, we were just talking about LaSalle. That defense gave up 19 points in their league schedule, so they're ready for the playoffs too.
Turn all the way up. So what do you want? You want a defense that's playing well, you want explosive playmakers, a veteran quarterback, and a coach who's been through it all. St. Anthony, I mean, that's the recipe. Stir it up, bake for an hour, and ding, see what happens.
Capistrano Valley going to travel to Clark Field on Friday night. The winner of that game going to take on Calvary Marietta or Vasquez. Now, Calvary Marietta, good team out of that South Valley League, so a tough road for St. Anthony, even though they did get a pretty good draw.
And Vasquez, the team that beat St. Anthony this year on the road in a close game, but the Saints did not have Jalen Watson in that game and really played about as bad as they could play, according to AD Brian Walsh. So maybe excited for a rematch of that game.
JJ mentioned Valley Christian in the East Valley, but I wanted to give a quick shout out to Avalon, who's actually already a week deep into their playoffs because they're an 8-man team and that starts a week early. They're seeded second, so they're expected to get to the championship game. They really blew out the first team that they played, so they're well on their way, and we will have updates on that game on Friday night as well.
That's it. That's all. There ain't no more. Another episode of Long Beach Sports Talk in the books. The bracketology is real, people. Print them out. Get out your pencils or your pens if you're confident. Fill them out and let us know what your upsets are, what your championship picks are, what you think is going to happen in the coming weeks. God, not only do we love football, but we exponentially love playoff football. And you can join us on this incredible road as we get done with the 2014 season. I'm pretty sure we're going to have a lot to talk about next week. For everybody who was involved in this show, at the Press Telegram, in the Gazette newspapers, and at GazetteSports.com. For Mike, for Tyler, for Chris, for JJ.
That's it. I'm taking your blue check.
For everybody else who we will see in the stands this weekend for playoff pigskin. Take care, y'all.
Tyler's going to be checkmark hunting.